Charles Leadbeater. Charlie,
Thank you.
welcome to Mexico.
Thank you.
Los dejo clase con Charles Leadbeater.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Berta, for that introduction. And thank you very much to Marinella and everyone at CLASE for bringing me to Mexico. I'm very excited to be here. And in the next 40 minutes, I just want to introduce you to one simple idea. And that idea is that big change can come from small places. Big change can come from small people. Big change can come from people with very few resources. And the challenge that Marinella set to reinvent education in Mexico seems such a huge challenge. 35 million students, more than 200,000 schools and colleges. Well, how could an organization as small as CLASE change such a huge, great system? Well, it can. And it can do it by creating an independent voice for better education for parents, for teachers, for students, for business, for civil society. It can change the course of debate in Mexico about education. And it can because it can also encourage from the grassroots up this bubbling up of innovation and creativity as people find new and more effective ways to learn. And the reason I'm so sure that CLASE can have that impact in Mexico is that I have seen it all around the world, that people from the most unlikely places, small places, marginal places, with few resources, can have big change. 2 weeks ago, I was in Pakistan. Now, I know in Mexico you're very worried about, people say about violence and extremism, and there's a kind of mood sometimes of depression or cynicism. You should go to Pakistan because that would cheer you up. Pakistan, trust in the government is very low. There's a profound sense of inertia. Corruption is very widespread. There's violence, extremism. But what the headlines don't tell you is that there are also incredibly powerful cycles of resilience and adaptation and creativity and entrepreneurship and innovation from the grassroots up. And it's those cycles which will make Pakistan's future better. And I suspect the same must be true in Mexico, that there are tremendous cycles of resilience and adaptation. And the more the government can work with those to amplify them and to promote them and to scale their impact, the more successful the government will be. The more the government stands alone and on its own and ignores those forces, the harder its job will become. So I'm just going to give you a snapshot of some of the things that I have seen around the world which mean that I think that there are huge opportunities to learn in new kinds of ways. So these are some kids that I met in a school in South Africa. And you see children like this all over the world. And the message of this is that there is no better time to be involved in education and learning. Because all around the world, children and parents want better education and more opportunities to learn. They are coming with hope and belief that education will make for a better life. Or these children who I met 2 weeks ago in a room, in a house, in a slum outside Islamabad, who have walked from their local community to this room. It's the only school they can reach, and they come with their eyes full of yearning for learning. And so there is no better time all over the world, regardless of religion, of ethnicity, of political belief, people want education and learning. But why then does education so disappoint and so frustrate so many people? Well, it's because too many of them end up sitting in rows, listening to teachers, being lectured at, instructed in ways that don't engage them. So these girls and boys are in a school in northern Uganda. Northern Uganda has been the scene of a civil war, and Save the Children launched a campaign called Rewrite the Future, which raised hundreds of millions of dollars to build schools in places like this affected by conflict. It started with 5 people who set out to build schools in zones of conflict, and they ended up in 5 years improving the education of 10 million children. They got 1.8 million children into school for the first time. So 5 people set out to achieve that, and in the end they built a movement and a campaign that changed education for millions. The woman who started this program, Tove Wang, I asked her at the end what she thought she had really achieved. And she said, we've achieved massive things. We've got all these children into school, but the problem is that they're not learning enough. It's all very well to get children into school, but if they don't learn when they're at school, then it's not very effective. And what we should really have tried to do was to promote learning, not just school. School is just one route to learning, and in order for school to really deliver learning, it needs to operate in a different way. One response to that you see all over the world, but especially in Pakistan and India, parts of Africa, is this: the growth of the low-cost private school. Schools like this, charging perhaps $2 a day, ensuring that teachers turn up, ensuring that children are properly taught. 30% of children in Karachi, 20 million people in Karachi, 30% of children go to schools like this. And they sit in rows like this, and they do learn, and they do pass the test. But it's not really a better kind of education. It's just doing the job that schools should be doing anyway. So our challenge, I think, is not just to deliver more education, more school, but to deliver better forms of learning and to do it differently. So not just more, but better and different. And why do we need to do that? Because if we're really going to engage the children who drop out at the age of 11 or 12, or the parents who cannot see the point of school, or the children who get bored with traditional lessons, we need to do it differently. And all around the world you see this, that where you have huge hope that is met by enormous frustration and disappointment at what education does, and when you see huge possibility to do it in different ways, then you get innovation. And so what I'm going to say now is just introduce you to some of the people that I have met who are creating some of the most significant innovations that I have seen. And I'll just show you, to begin with, some examples of how people are changing learning to make it different and more effective. And then I'll say a bit about how they've done it, where they've come from. So the first question is really, what should we be learning? What should education really be preparing children and students for? Imagine that you were trying to write a curriculum in the year 1912, 100 years ago, and you were trying to map out a curriculum to prepare children to learn what they needed to learn for the century to come. Well, had you written that curriculum in 1912, you wouldn't have seen the motor car, you wouldn't have seen the jet engine, you wouldn't have seen television, you wouldn't have seen the nuclear bomb, you wouldn't have seen World War. And yet all of those things were things that we had to cope with. So in other words, when you think how fast society is changing, how quickly new things are developing, to create a rigid, detailed curriculum is going to be a mistake. And instead, we should be building learning around our capacity to ask and answer interesting and difficult questions. So I met this guy in South Africa, in Cape Town. He's one of 17 children. He comes from Togo, and he's an absolutely brilliant mathematician. And when this guy writes simultaneous equations on the blackboard, it's like he's dancing. It's like it's a kind of rhythmic musical activity, because it just kind of flows out of him. He's lucky enough to be at something called the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences. And the African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, their whole pedagogy is built on the idea that the point of learning is to open people's minds and to get them to realize that questions often don't have definite answers, but the point of learning is to learn how to explore them together and to unpick and unpack them. And so when you go to this place, there is such a dynamic between the teachers and the students. They're like they're in a single team, all playing together. So one of the things that we're going to have to ask is, what should we be learning? And how do we keep learning open to the change around us? How will we show what we can do? Education systems the world over get people to do exams, and they sit in rows and they write on papers. But actually, one of the most productive ways to show what you can do is to actually do it. So this is one of the most amazing schools in the world. This is High Tech High in San Diego. And the philosophy at High Tech High is that children, students, should be producers of learning, producers of work. They shouldn't just be consumers of lessons. And the main way that they organize learning is to have children working together in teams with teachers to build things. In this case, an aeroplane. And the way they show what they can learn is that they hold big exhibitions every few months for parents and local people to come, and they present what they have done in different ways. At this school, the children at this school have written 53 textbooks, written by children for other children about the subjects that they're learning. So in other words, learning should be a productive activity, a doing activity, where you show what you can learn by showing what you make. Who leads learning? The key thing to better learning is better teachers. It's teachers who can create dynamic environments which are challenging, exciting, but supportive. And the key to improving learning is not really better schools or computers, it's really better teachers. But alongside teachers, what you see are things like this. So this is a project in Holland, in the Netherlands, a weekend school for the most disadvantaged children, so they get taught practical skills by people who are practitioners. Not teachers, but professionals. And that they lend their skills to those of the school, and so together you get both teachers and professionals who, in this case as a photographer, teaching children much more practical skills. To meet the challenges of educating millions of young people, we will need to train millions and millions more teachers. But to make that easier, if we could bring in more skills from professions and others who could lend their skills to schools and communities, then we would multiply our resources. Where will learning happen? Of course, learning happens in school. You learn English and maths and Spanish and science in school. But actually, children spend perhaps 15% of their time in school. Most of the time, children are in their homes, in their communities, with their family, with their friends. A huge amount of learning happens beyond the classroom, outside school. And so this is where one of the most radical and impressive innovations in Latin America began. This is an alleyway in Sao Paulo. And it was in this alleyway, which had been taken over by drug dealers, that many years ago a group of artists came together with a group of journalists and some children to turn the alleyway into a work of art. They didn't want to create an education program. They didn't want to be teachers. They simply wanted to create a space, a civic space, where children could come together outside school and be safe and play together. At the end of that project, the children wouldn't go away, and they asked to do more, and so the team involved designed another project to build murals and then mosaics, and then they built websites. And after a while, they realized that what they were doing was creating learning programs based in communities rather than in schools. The organization that began in that alleyway is now called Aprendiz. It's the most powerful NGO in education in Brazil. It has the most visited website on education in Latin America, and it has promoted community-based pedagogy in more than 150 cities across Brazil. It all began there. And it all began with a question. And the question was, what if you could promote learning not just at school, but outside school? So one of the reasons that people, young boys and girls, drop out of school is that they can't see the relevance of it, that it doesn't solve their immediate problems, that there are other pressures in their lives. They need to earn money or make a living, and they can't see the point of being at school, especially if they're doing badly, especially if they're falling behind, then they're likely to drop out. So one of the things that we have to think about is how we combine work and learning, earning a living and learning at the same time, and how you bring those together. So this is a school. It's a farm, but it's also a school. And this farm is about 40 miles outside Asunción, the capital of Paraguay. And it was created by a remarkable man called Martin Burt. And on this farm, the children work for a week on the farm, and they earn the money working on the farm to employ the teachers who teach them in the classroom the next week. And when that group is in the classroom, Another group is working on the farm. And when you walk around this farm, there are 16 different businesses. There's a yogurt business, a cheese business, a hotel, a restaurant, a pig business. And when you walk around and talk to the children on the farm, they can tell you in great detail what they need to do to raise pigs and to sell them, or to dig vegetable patches which are organic, or how to make yogurt. And they can tell you the chemistry of yogurt, or the economics of pigs, or the science of vegetables. And they're earning whilst they're learning, and they're learning whilst they're earning. This school now makes $330,000 a year. The children employ the teachers. They work and they learn. This is a school which is also a business. So when you consider the enormous expectations that young people have, that education will help them get better livelihoods, better ways to live, solutions like this are a very important part of it, challenging the very notion of what is a school. Why are students so bored at school? Why is it that so many children come to school and they're physically present, but their mind is elsewhere? They're psychologically absent. Their minds are wandering wherever they may go because what is happening in front of them is so boring. So this man, I met Theo Roca in Belo Horizonte in Brazil, and he's one of the most remarkable innovators I've ever met, because Theo has invented more than 200 games that you can use to learn anything from Portuguese, Spanish, mathematics, English, science, all through the medium of games. And not complicated games, but very simple games that any school could use, using wooden blocks. He has created schools in villages where there is no school, and people go from house to house, and each day a new house becomes a school. He's created schools under trees. He's created ways to learn that children find engaging and motivating because they're enjoyable, they're fun, and they pull them. Across all these places that I've looked with these different approaches, I would say there's a very common theme. And it's really, really simple, that when children go to these places, they work hard and they have fun. Work hard and have fun. They don't want to work hard and not have fun, but nor they just want to have fun and get nothing done. They want to work hard and have fun. And the fun makes it engaging, and the work makes it ultimately rewarding. And what you see is people creating that combination. They make it real, they link it to the real world, they do it with children, not just to children. They're much more interactive, and as Marinella said in her opening, they create dynamic learning environments where there's lots of conversation and exchange, and children are real participants in learning. And they pull children, they motivate them and capture their imaginations. They don't push learning at them. And when you get those combinations, make it real, do it with children, make it compelling and pull them, then you get learning. If they're sat in desks, memorizing by rote and transmitting knowledge as if by memory, that's not learning. Learning involves this kind of interaction. So where does change like that come from? Where can you find people bringing about that kind of change? It often comes from the margins. My experience after working for governments in many different places as an advisor is that government and the state has all the resources and few of the ideas. Social entrepreneurs and NGOs have many ideas but few resources. And the most exciting and interesting ideas often come from outside big systems. They come from places like this. So the woman who created this is one of the most radical revolutionaries in education I've ever met. And she, in Pune, in India, set out to create a way to take learning to children who were growing up on building sites, because their families were builders and they moved from place to place building big buildings. Pune in India is the fastest growing city in Asia. At any one time, there are 5,000 building sites, and that means there are 30,000 children living on building sites. And so this woman created this bus so that you could take learning to where the children were rather than expecting them to come to the school. She's a remarkable woman. This is her. She's tiny. She's in her 70s. And she's absolutely made of steel. And the idea that this woman, a professor of social work at Mumbai University, came up with was not just to do that scheme to take learning to building sites. She came up with an idea for how young women with a secondary education could create preschool groups in their own homes and earn a very modest living by providing preschool education for very poor families. In India, these groups are called Balwadis. And she created out of that idea an organization called Pratham, 1994. Now Pratham educates 21 million children in more than 500,000 Balwadis. That idea came from this woman. So she doesn't look like an innovator. She doesn't wear a hoodie. She doesn't look like Mark Zuckerberg. She's not Steve Jobs. She's thin, frail, and tiny, and she's absolutely a revolutionary. Change comes from outsiders. So this is the guy, Martin Burt, who created that farm school in Paraguay. Martin's an outsider to education. Martin set up the first microcredit movement in Latin America, in Paraguay. And when he came to education, he came with the mindset, the point of view of someone from microcredit. And he thought, how can we make this school a way that young people earn their way out of poverty? So that education is like microcredit. It's a way of earning your way to a better future. And it was because he had such a different view that he could see a different possibility. When I asked all these people that I met, Martin included, who their biggest opponents were, where they had their biggest difficulty, it was often with educationalists. Educationalists who said, you can't do it that way, it won't work, it's even wrong to do that. And so there will be no change in education unless outsiders can come in and challenge the status quo. Education is both a source of hope and liberation, and it is simultaneously one of the most conservative and reactionary institutions in society. So the third thing that these people do is that they often don't have many resources. So they have to learn how to borrow other people's resources and piggyback on other people. So you will meet this remarkable woman tomorrow, Rana Danjani from Jordan. Her project, We Love Reading, it doesn't have any teachers because it trains mothers to lead reading groups. And it doesn't have any infrastructure because when she started, she was looking for somewhere to start. She had nowhere to go. She went to her local mosque, and the imam agreed that she could use a room there. Across the Middle East, there are mosques everywhere. If you can create reading groups in mosques, you can create a national network of reading groups. So these innovators often piggyback on top of other resources. They don't just have their own. The most impressive innovations that I have seen are extremely simple. They are very low cost, and they involve building on people's capabilities rather than just serving them. They seek out capability and capacity within communities. So I spent an afternoon with these women in Istanbul. These women had all come to Istanbul from the countryside. They grew up in tiny villages. None of them had gone to school beyond the age of 11. And they were in Istanbul, they were married, they had children going to school, and their main concern was how to be better mothers, and that they wanted to be able to support their children going through school. All around the world, there are hundreds of millions of new children going to school. That means there are hundreds of millions of parents who are taking children through school for the first time, who themselves have very little experience of school, and may themselves have been disappointed by school. So this is a very simple program. It brings together groups of mothers over 25 weeks in a structured program where they learn from one another with a facilitator what school is going to be like, how to prepare their children, how to support them doing homework, maths, English, so on and so forth. This has reached 250,000 mothers in Turkey. It's been taken up by the state, and it could reach 20 million mothers in Turkey. It's proven that mothers, the children of mothers who go through these groups, are more likely to stay at school longer, more likely to go to university, and more likely to achieve more in their results. It's absolutely simple. There's no technology, it's just a room with mothers talking. How do you change systems? All these people have these great ideas, but they bang up against systems, these big bureaucratic systems. Well, here are 3 examples. Infiltrate the system. This woman, Vicky Colbert, spoke at CLASE in 2010. Her innovation, Escuela Nueva, is a software for schools. It's a way of teaching and learning which enables one teacher in a multi-grade school to teach 60 children by breaking them up into groups, and the children teach one another in a structured way. It means that one teacher can enable 60 children to learn without teaching them in the traditional way. Vicky says that this approach to education isn't just better education, but it's got 2 other big things. The first is to really deliver on the promise of social justice, of equality. Then education needs to meet different needs in different ways. And that traditional academic education is often bad for equality because it penalizes the people least prepared for those systems. But secondly, her approach to education is that education should be an exercise in self-governance, that children should learn how to collaborate and work together, almost to be citizens together. And in Colombia, the idea that education should teach citizenship is a very potent and powerful idea. So she has gained scale by taking her idea and almost infecting the big system with it, infiltrating it and creating a new virus. So you can infiltrate the system. You can leapfrog the system. So this is an example of leapfrogging. These are some computers in a slum called Madangir in Delhi. And they were put there by Sugata Mitra, an educational innovator who wanted to work out whether you could teach children and whether children could learn even when there was no teacher. And his hypothesis was that if you could provide children with computers and with learning software and with a bit of support, then they would start teaching one another. And what you see in these computers with their great big yellow steel covers is children playing games, doing exercises, and teaching one another. Sugata took some of these computers to a rural village where there was no computers, there was barely electricity. But this area of India had a reputation for singing. And he left the computers overnight with the children in the community center where they were working. These children had never seen a computer before. By the morning, not only had they found the music software on the computer, but they had recorded a song that they sang. In Pakistan 2 weeks ago, I saw this scheme. This is a maths teacher in Islamabad, and through his computer, he's teaching these children that you can see who are in a school hundreds of miles away in the Swat Valley, where it's very difficult and dangerous to go, and where there are no specialist maths teachers. And so he is teaching them by remote control through this internet satellite link. The most remarkable thing, though, is that those children in that room each have a tablet computer. Costs about $150, Chinese. And at the end of the lesson, they do some tests, and the results of the tests are uploaded so that you can immediately see how much they've really learned through this lesson. At the end of the lesson, the first lesson they did in this school, they let the children play with the tablet computers after the lesson was over. These children had never seen a tablet computer before. Within 5 minutes, they had found a game called Angry Birds, and they were playing it. So all over the world, what you see are children embracing this kind of technology like it's air, or like they've got gills and they want to go swimming. When I see technology like this, I feel slightly anxious, like I'm going to look foolish. When they see technology like this, it's as if they're fish and they just want to dive in the water. And our education systems are so poor at enabling and using this technology in creative ways which unlock the skills, imagination, and capability of young people. There is a huge opportunity to leapfrog where we are to create new ways to learn. And finally, meet this guy. This is the guy, Madhav Chavan, who took that idea of the Balwadi that lady invented in Mumbai University, and Madhav turned it into Pratham, 21 million children. But not only does Pratham run these hundreds of thousands of preschool groups, but a few years ago it started its own independent assessment of the quality of Indian education. And it rallied a community of people all over India on the same day to go to schools and ask the same questions. Did teachers turn up? What were they teaching? What were children learning? And on one day it created a snapshot of Indian education. That has turned Pratham into the most powerful NGO in education in India. And because Pratham did that, the Indian government then had to commission its own survey of education. In other words, it's become a player in the political dialogue and the political debate about education, not just a grassroots organization. It attacks from the grassroots up, but also from the top down. And so when I asked all these people what they did and how they scaled, they said that they scaled more like a Chinese restaurant than McDonald's. So Madhav, when Madhav started Pratham, he got some pro bono advice from McKinsey. And McKinsey said, what you should do is you should take your model, and a bit like McDonald's, everywhere you go, you should roll it out in the same way. And that way you have a completely standardized way of ensuring the quality of what you do. And Madhav said, that's very interesting, but everywhere you go, there are Chinese restaurants. And Chinese restaurants are never quite the same. You do get the same kind of menu, but they don't look the same. They're not standardized. But you never go into a Chinese restaurant and say, oh, good Lord, I didn't realize this was a Chinese restaurant. I mean, you can recognize one, but they have family likenesses. They're not standardized systems. And so the way that all these projects have scaled is more like a Chinese restaurant than McDonald's. They have similar common principles, but they apply them in different ways, in different places, so that when they come to a local area, they can really connect with it. And they can make a real connection with the culture and the resources and the community and the parents, and they're not imposed on it, they connect with it. Too many of the innovations that we have that come from big business or from the government impose themselves on communities. They enforce a rigid structure. These schemes, they all connect with it in a much more adaptive kind of way. It's like the strawberry. If you want a really good way of thinking how to spread, think like a strawberry. Because a strawberry is a plant called a radicant. And strawberries put down their roots where they grow, and then they grow and they put down another root. They're not like trees. Trees come from a central root and they grow up and out. Strawberries put down a root and grow, and then they put down a root. These schemes are more like strawberries. They put down their roots where they grow, and they spread and scale that way. And the key to that, I asked all these people what it was that they were leading. And of course, they're leading organizations with budgets and products and services and teams. But actually, all of them told me that really what they were leading was a movement. They were leading a movement to bring about change. And they wanted to bring people to that movement, to excite them, to motivate them, so that people themselves would do things and not just be on the receiving end, but to be actors. And one of the things that I really like about CLASE is this idea of leaders in action. People who lead through what they do, and through what they do, they inspire others to follow them. Final picture. This is a remarkable man, Mushtaq Chapra. 1994, Mushtaq Chapra sat with 3 friends, all businessmen, bemoaning the state of Pakistan. It was corrupt, no one could do business, the government didn't work, and after a while of moaning, they decided that they would do something about it. And so they decided to set up a foundation. And it's not named after any of the members of that group. It doesn't bear a family name. It's called the Citizens Foundation because it's a foundation for citizens. It's funded anonymously, mainly by small donations. 1994, they set out to build 1,000 schools that would be models of schools in Pakistan, that would educate girls and boys in equal numbers. They had no experience of education, no background in it. They just thought it was something that they could do. They went to the leading educationalists in Pakistan and said, how do you think we should do this? And all of them said, you shouldn't do it. You've got no idea what you're doing. Your education should be left to teachers and educationalists. But Mushtaq and his friends persisted. And now, They have 823 schools. They educate almost 100,000 children. And these schools, the Citizen Foundation schools, represent only 0.5% of children in Pakistan. But this body has become the most influential agent of change in Pakistan's entire education system. It is the most potent source of new ideas. It is the most respected and authoritative voice in education. And it came from 4 businessmen who in 1994 decided that they had had enough. And Mushtaq says, if you want to bring about change, you have to think like a movement. So I'll give you, finally, an example of what it is to lead a movement. This is why I used to be an executive in newspapers. I had quite a successful career. I became executive assistant deputy editor of a newspaper called The Independent. And if you've ever had a job with a title that long, executive assistant deputy editor, you will know that my job involved getting people new chairs. And the longer my title got, the more boring my job got. And each day I would come into work and I would find in my office a great big rock. And I would look at this rock and I would think, I wonder if anyone will come and move this rock for me. And of course, the rock was the organization that I was responsible for. And it was big and heavy and wet and difficult to get your hands around. And so I would look at this rock and drink my coffee and look at the rock, and the rock wouldn't move. And then to move a rock, what you have to do is you have to pick the rock up and you have to throw it. That is the only way you can move a rock. Propulsion. So now imagine that your job is not to get a rock from point A to point B, but to get a bird from point A to point B. How would you get a bird to travel from point A to point B? Well, if you've spent too much time with the wrong management consultants, you will know that what you do is you get the bird, you strap its wings up with tape, you attach a rock to the bottom of it, and then you throw it, thereby getting the bird from point A to point B, but killing the bird. So then imagine that you have to get an entire flock of birds. And the flock of birds are parents and students and teachers and businesses and politicians. And you have to get a flock of birds from point A to point B. How do you get them to point B? You have to put bird seed and water at point B. You have to attract them. You have to pull them. And that's what CLASE has to do. It has to create a movement, a flock that wants to move in a new direction. And it does so by attracting them, and attracting them with an idea that's so potent about education in Mexico not just being more and better, but different. So can you here now, this group, begin a process of change that could change education across Mexico? Yes, you can. Because Vicky Colbert changed education in Colombia from starting in one rural school. Mushtaq Chapra and his friends changed education in Pakistan, starting with a meal in a restaurant and 4 businessmen. Martine Burt has created a movement of 2,000 self-sustaining schools around the world, starting in that tiny, tiny school outside Asuncion. Madhav Chavan turned Pratham into a movement of 21 million children, the most influential NGO in the largest country in the earth, from nothing. They all started with virtually nothing, and they have brought change. Can you do the same? Yes, you can. Thank you.